In the last video we focused on Mesopotamia and Egypt, but today we're going to talk about the ancient history of Greece and Rome. While Sumer was living large over in Mesopotamia, a people called the Minoans were busy creating a groovy new civilization in the little Aegean island of Crete. These lot had plenty of contact with Egypt and Phoenicia and learned from them navigation, ceramics, metallurgy and agriculture. Towards the year 2000 BC, they began building palaces for their king, or kings. We don't really know whether they were a unified kingdom or were organized into city-states. The most famous one was the Palace of Knossos, which was rebuilt after a big earthquake around the year 1700 BC. Yep, this kind of natural disasters were quite common back then. According to Greek mythology, it was ruled by King Minos, who built a labyrinth under the palace to keep his horrible son, the Minotaur, until he was slain by the heroic Theseus. The Minoans also developed a type of writing called Linear A, which nobody has managed to decipher to this day. But the peaceful times wouldn't last very long for this culture, because around the year 1500 BC, some northern peoples arrived and set up camp in the Hellenic Peninsula. This was the Mycenaean culture, which could be considered the precursor of the Greeks, and founded cities like Argos, Athens, and the one that their civilization was named after, Mycenae. They also introduced the cult of Zeus, war chariots, and bronze weapons. Their goal was to dominate maritime trade in the region, so they decided to take control of Crete, conquering the Minoans around the year 1400 BC. Both cultures then intermixed and developed Linear B writing. Although this type of script has been deciphered, we still have very little information about this period. It is generally thought that around 1200 BC, the Mycenaeans started a war with the mythical city of Troy, located in the western coast of present-day Turkey. According to the legend, the Mycenaeans were able to take the city using the sneaky ploy of the Trojan horse. That was a time of so much conflict that these Mycenaeans became seriously weakened, and that allowed another northern people, the Dorians, to start conquering different regions of the Hellenic Peninsula. These Dorians would later found Sparta, among other cities. One theory says that all this chaos may have been what caused the migration of the Sea Peoples, which we talked about in the video on Mesopotamia and Egypt. Some time later, Linear B writing was lost, and Greece fell into a 500-year-long dark age about which practically nothing is known. How crazy is that? But then the lights came back on around 800 BC, when these Greeks began using an adaptation of the Phoenician alphabet to represent their language. This would become the origin of Archaic Greece. Works like the Odyssey and the Iliad, supposedly written by Homer, were produced in this era. The ancient Greeks didn't form one united nation. Instead, they were a collection of independent polis, or city-states. For a long time, each of these polis were ruled by kings, called anax or basileus, but that gradually changed towards more democratic formulas. But not in the way we understand democracy today, mind you, because for starters women couldn't vote, and obviously neither could slaves, and slavery was widespread. In Athens, the figure of the king disappeared, and power was split among three men, the archons. The famous legislator Solon created the Ecclesia, or Greek Popular Assembly, and the Boule, a kind of council. Over in Sparta things worked a bit differently. They established a diarchy, which is a form of government headed by two kings, and below them 5 ephors, chosen by an assembly of Spartans, the Apella, and also a senate, or Gerousia, comprised by the eldest Spartans. At the same time, the Agoge, or Spartan upbringing, turned young boys into killing machines, while the Helots, who were basically their slaves, took care of the farming. Later they joined up with neighboring cities, and together they formed the Peloponnesian League. The polis of Corinth became more important during the rule of the Bacchiadae kings by producing the first trireme boats. At the polis of Thebes, they gathered together several surrounding cities in an oligarchic government, establishing the Boeotian Confederation. But, in spite of their differences, there was something that united all of these peoples, and that was sport. By far the most famous sporting competition were the Olympic Games, thus called because they were celebrated at the city of Olympia. Eventually, these lot found that Greece was getting too crowded, and so they jumped on their boats and started setting up colonies all over the place. The main ones were at Syracuse, in Magna Graecia, and also Miletus and Ephesus on the coast of Asia Minor. Among their neighbors was the rich kingdom of Lydia, where the first coins were minted. Maybe that's what attracted Cyrus the Great and his Achaemenid Persians, who steamrolled them in 546 BC. Other Greeks reached a territory they called Iberia, the land of the Iberians, and there they founded colonies along with the Phoenicians. The northern region of this Iberia, like several parts of Europe, was inhabited by the Celtic people. Meanwhile, according to the myth, in the center of Italy, brothers Romulus and Remus founded the city of Rome around the year 753 BC, with Romulus as the first of its 7 kings. But of course back then Rome was just a tiny village surrounded by Etruria, a powerful dodecapolis or alliance of 12 city-states. This Etruria had begun as a monarchy, but the governments of the cities gradually devolved into separate oligarchic republics. The year 537 BC saw the Battle of Alalia, where Carthage and Etruria defeated the Greeks and cut off their access to the western Mediterranean. This weakened the Tartessic culture and probably precipitated its demise. It seems that the last king was a guy called Arganthonios. In 509 BC, Tarquin the Proud, the king of Rome at that time, was deposed and the Romans established the Roman Republic, which would be ruled by 2 consuls, elected each year, and the Senate, comprised by 300 members. In the beginning, those positions were only available to the aristocracy, or patricians, while the regular citizens, or plebeians, had to suck it up, because they had no power whatsoever. There were also several assemblies, like the Centuriate Assembly, the Tribal Assembly, and over time the Plebeian Council, which would finally empower the common people. Back in the Hellenic Peninsula, Clisthenes became ruler of Athens in 508 BC. He reformed the political system to make it more democratic, and those were good times. But life was about to get very difficult. In the year 490 BC, the Greeks fought their first war against the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Darius I tried to conquer Greece, but the Athenian forces of Miltiades the Younger and Themistocles turned back an initial incursion at the Battle of Marathon. The Greeks understood that the Persians would return in force, and so they closed ranks in a Pan-Hellenic League, and indeed, a decade later, the huge army of King Xerxes I arrived in Greece. In this second Persian war, the Spartans of King Leonidas managed to delay the Persians at the Battle of Thermopylae, gaining time for the Athenians to regroup and achieve a great victory at the Battle of Salamis. Xerxes was pretty ticked off, but he didn't back down. Well, at least until he was thrashed again at the Battle of Platea. At that point, the Persians had had enough and decided to go back home. But don't think that the Greeks would chill and enjoy peace after this. No. No sooner had they kicked Xerxes' rear end than they went looking for another fight. This time it would be the first of 3 Sicilian wars against Carthage over the island of Sicily. In Italy, the 5th century BC was marked by Rome's wars against Veii, one of the main Etruscan cities. After 3 rounds, the powerful Etruscan civilization had no choice but to surrender and beg Rome for an alliance because they were facing an invasion by Celts from Central Europe. But this went poorly for both of them, as it ended in the sacking of Rome by the Gallic leader Brennus in 387 BC. After the Persian Wars, the Hellenic Peninsula settled down and flourished for 50 years, the Pentecontaetia, the most splendorous period of classical Greece. In 477 BC, Athens became a superpower when it joined other cities in the Delian League. The famous Pericles, nephew of Clisthenes, was named Archon and created laws that made all men equal before the law. He also pimped out Athens, revamping the Agora and the Acropolis with magnificent constructions like the Parthenon, designed by Ictinus, Callicrates and Phidias. The philosopher Socrates also lived in this period, as did Anaxagoras, the father of history Herodotus, and writers Sophocles and Aristophanes. In 431 BC, Sparta and Athens couldn't manage to agree on whether democracy or oligarchy was the best form of government. So, they decided to settle it like humans usually do, resulting in the Peloponnesian War. After nearly 3 decades of beating the crap out of each other, Sparta was victorious at the Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BC, and imposed its political system throughout the old Delian League. But their predominance wouldn't last very long, because soon the Attic cities, Argos, Boeotia and Corinth, allied with Persia to fight Sparta at the Battle of Corinth. Sparta managed to win that one too, but was left limping badly, and later, while seeking to take control of Thebes, the generals Epaminondas and Pelopidas put an end to its good times at the Battle of Leuctra in the year 371 BC. Not that these Thebans would last much longer, mind you, for the year 360 brought the Macedonians, headed by King Philip II and later by his son, Alexander the Great. This superstar of history took over all of Greece, and then, not happy with that, set out on a journey that would take him to conquer Egypt, where he founded Alexandria, a great lighthouse for culture and knowledge. Later, after defeating Darius III at the Battle of Gaugamela, he went on to conquer the rest of the Achaemenid Persian Empire all the way east to India. Talk about an epic run! But then he died, unexpectedly in Babylon at the age of 33, and his generals immediately started squabbling amongst themselves over the vast kingdom. This went on for decades, in what are known as the Wars of the Diadochi. This was the Greek Hellenistic period, when Greek culture expanded through multiple different regions. The most notable are Ptolemaic Egypt, ruled by Ptolemies and Cleopatras, the Seleucid Empire, founded by Seleucus I, Antigonid Macedonia, and the kingdom of Epirus, whose main leader was Pyrrhus. This Pyrrhus challenged the growing power of the Roman Republic. And this was because after the 3 Samnite Wars, Rome had defeated all of its neighbouring tribes, including Etruria, and taken over the Italian peninsula. In an attempt to stop this expansion, Pyrrhus kicked off the Pyrrhic Wars, but he only managed to delay the inevitable. It is said that the Romans destroyed Pyrrhus' army by sending pigs covered in tar and set on fire against the enemy's elephants. Think of it as the ancient history version of shooting missiles against tanks. By this point, Rome only had one powerful enemy left in the entire Mediterranean, which was Carthage. That last rival was tackled in the First Punic War of 264 BC, after which Rome took control of Sicily and created a powerful fleet copying the design of the Punic boats. The Carthaginians tried to rebuild their power by invading Hispania, but the Romans decided that they also wanted a piece of that cake, and eventually this led to the Second Punic War. It was then that the great Carthaginian leader Hannibal Barca crossed the Alps with his army and his elephants, seeking to hit Rome with a surprise attack from the north. It was so completely bonkers that it actually worked, and his victory at the Battle of Cannae is legendary. But unfortunately, Rome had on its side the equally great Scipio Africanus, who beat Hannibal at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. After defeating Carthage, Rome was free to eat up all of Hispania, one bite at a time. There was another conflict, the Third Punic War, but that was basically the Romans wiping out Carthage. In 214 BC, Rome became involved in the 4 Macedonian Wars, after which they absorbed all of Greece and both peoples fused to form a superculture, like in Dragon Ball. Between the onslaught of the Romans and the Parthians, led by Mithridates I, what little was left of the Hellenistic kingdoms disappeared completely. The only one that managed to survive was Egypt. At this point, the Roman Republic was top banana and dominated practically all the known world. But, as is often the case, as soon as they ran out of foreign enemies, they began fighting amongst themselves. The main power struggle was between the two factions of the Populares, or populists, and Optimates, or aristocrats. The 1st century BC witnessed 4 Roman civil wars, the last of which would end up shattering the Republic. The first was headed by Gaius Marius against Lucius Cornelius Sulla, who then had to leave Rome to deal with the king of Pontus, Mithridates VI. Over the following years, Pompey, Crassus, and the super famous Julius Caesar formed a triumvirate of rock stars. In reality, Caesar wanted to go solo, but he was lacking the street cred of military achievement, so he set off to conquer neighbouring Gaul. Caesar did extremely well for himself and defeated the Gallic commander Vercingetorix, at which point he started to get all cocky and said to himself, I think I'm going to keep Rome, and then proceeded to do just that, vanquishing Pompey in the Second Civil War and making himself consul for life. For a while things went really well for him. He even found time to have a child with Queen Pharaoh Cleopatra. But then he was assassinated by a group of conspirators in 44 BC. His close friend Mark Antony and his adoptive son, Octavian, killed Caesar's killers in the Third Civil War, and then tried to kill each other in the Fourth. Mark Antony allied with Cleopatra's Egypt, but that wasn't enough to resist Octavian Augustus, who after winning the war and conquering all of Egypt, abolished the Republic and founded the Roman Empire in the year 27 BC. The Julio-Claudian dynasty was the first dynasty of Roman emperors. During this period, the Senate and assemblies gradually lost their influence in favour of the emperor. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, all of these slowly gained ground from the northern Germanic tribes and even reached Britain, where they founded Londinium, modern-day London. According to the Bible, this was the time when a certain Jesus Christ was born, who went on to create a new freestyling kind of Judaism called Christianity. But at that time, the religion was systematically persecuted by the first dynasties of the empire. The Flavian dynasty had plenty of trouble during the Jewish-Roman wars, and Emperor Titus ended up destroying the Second Temple of Jerusalem. The only part that was left standing was the Wailing Wall. But this guy also knew how to build stuff, and during his reign he inaugurated the Colosseum, the best place in Rome to see gladiator fights. Other extremely popular shows were naumachías, live representations of naval battles, and also quadriga chariot races held at the Roman hippodromes. Now you know where MMA, war movies and motorsports come from. The high watermark of the Roman Empire was during the 2nd century AD, with the Nerva Antonine dynasty of emperors who had Hispanic roots. Under Emperor Trajan, Rome reached its maximum territorial expansion after taking control of Dacia, which is modern-day Romania, and also Mesopotamia, including the Parthian capital Ctesiphon. His successor, Hadrian, also wanted to leave a mark and built Hadrian's Wall in Britain, on the border with Caledonia, or Scotland, to defend against the savage tribes of the Picts. The Jews, freed by Simon Bar Kokhba, tried to gain independence but were massacred in 135 by Hadrian, who then proceeded to rub salt in their wounds by erasing the province of Judea from the map, turning it into Palestine in honor of the Philistines, the sworn enemies of the Jews. Things still went smoothly with the following emperors, Antoninus Pius and Marcus Aurelius, but the arrival of Commodus to the throne signaled the beginning of Rome's decadence. After him came the Severus, Septimius Severus, Caracalla, Elagabalus, and Severus Alexander. This was a messy period, as Rome gradually lost control of its possessions. Over in the east, the Persians were rising once again, and under Ardashir I they conquered Parthia and founded the Sasanian Persian Empire in 226 AD. After the rule of the Severus, there were 50 years of anarchy, during which several different Roman generals declared themselves emperors. This is known as the crisis of the 3rd century. At this time, Rome began to have serious altercations with Germanic tribes known as the Goths. From this period, it is worth mentioning Emperor Aurelian, who promoted the sun god Sol Invictus as the main divinity and conquered the empires of Gaul and also Queen Zenobia's Palmyra. Roman general Diocletian managed to establish some order in the empire and created the Tetrarchy. He reasoned that the Roman Empire was simply too big for one single emperor to manage, so he divided the territory into 4 parts, with 4 emperors at the same time. Predictably, the experiment bombed right away, as the ambitious emperors went straight for each other's throats until eventually only one was left, Constantine I. Under his reign, the capital of the empire was moved to Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul, and Christianity was legalized with the Edict of Milan. Soon after that, Emperor Theodosius I decreed the Edict of Thessalonica, which made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. However, in 395 AD, the empire became split into 2, and, just to make things worse, sensing Rome's weakness, many barbarian tribes from the north tried to cross over into the empire's territory. These were a scary lot, with names like Franks, Burgundians, Alemanni, Alans, Vandals, Suebi, Marcomanni, Visigoths, Ostrogoths. But without a doubt, the most terrible invasion was by Attila's bloodthirsty Huns. Fortunately, Roman general Flavius Aetius managed to beat them back at the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains in the year 451, with support from the Visigoths. The last emperor would be Romulus Augustulus, who lived to witness how Odoacer and his Heruli tribe toppled what was left of the empire. At that point, the Western world was split amongst different Germanic peoples and new kingdoms popped up everywhere, like the Visigoths and Suebi in Hispania, the Ostrogoths in Italy after kicking out Odoacer, and the Franks and Burgundians in France. The Eastern Roman Empire managed to survive for another 1,000 years, and today we know it as the Byzantine Empire. But the fall of the West in the year 476 AD is traditionally considered to mark the end of ancient history and the beginning of the Middle Ages. And the rest is history. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave us a big like. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.